Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Labor Day. Welcome back to the Quarantine Film Series. I'm your host, Kabir Sehgal. We're back bringing you these live conversations with filmmakers, great creative individuals. We started this broadcast way back in March, and we have just resumed the series because of the demand. Everyone was saying, where did you go? We didn't go anywhere. We're just camping out here. I'm hunkered down in Atlanta, my parents' place. Mom, please get off the Wi-Fi so we can do this. But these are really conversations with incredible creative individuals, because the creative calendar has essentially been canceled, at least the physical portion. Film festivals have been canceled, concerts, gigs. So this is a platform to put the spotlight back on the people who create the incredible content, the movies, the films, the music that challenge, provoke us, and get us thinking in new ways. So that's what we're here for. If you want to know when we're live, just check out all my social media, every platform. And if you have questions, just drop a question in the comments field, and we'll try to get that to the incredible filmmaker who's on the show. Especially today, we have a very, very remarkable individual. She's a award-winning director, producer, and founder of Film Fatales. Her debut feature film, I Believe in Unicorns, premiered at South by Southwest in 2014 and won the Grand Jury Prize at the Atlanta Film Festival, my favorite festival, hometown festival. She's an incredible conceptual artist. She's taught at many universities. She's been a programmer for several film festivals, and she's right at the nexus of amazing and wonderful. So please welcome to the broadcast, the incredible Leah.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Welcome to the broadcast, Leah Meyerhoff. Good to see you. First, I got to ask you, are you safe? I know you're in Los Angeles. What's going on with the fires?
So I'm looking out my window, and there's literally a giant plume of smoke from the wildfires. They are far away, technically, but emotionally they feel very close. You know, last night there was this ominous red glow in the sky. So it does definitely feel like the world is literally and metaphorically on fire. But it's nice to be here with you during this time.
Well, thanks for making time and, putting the show ahead of your safety. We appreciate it. No, but thank you so much. I want to ask you first, I guess, how has the quarantine affected you? What did you have lined up that's been canceled or postponed?
Yeah, so I was in a writer's room on a Warner Brothers show when the quarantine began, and we pivoted into a virtual room. Some of the films I'm producing have seen their distribution journey change. There's one film I was consulting on that was set to premiere in competition at South by Southwest. That obviously didn't happen. Another one, did one film festival at CineQuest and then kind of found its way and is now coming out virtually. So things have shifted as far as my own personal life. Not too much has changed. I don't go to the office anymore. I work from home now. As far as Film Fatales goes, we used to meet every month at the WGA here in Los Angeles and a dozen other cities around the country for these in-person dinner parties. That has all shifted to the virtual space, and we're now hosting weekly webinars online, which we've been doing for the past 6 months or so now, which, there's a silver lining in all of this, which is moving into a virtual space. I don't know if you found this as well, but we are reaching a wider and more inclusive audience than we ever could have with some of our in-person events. So that's been one small piece of silver lining through all of this mess.
Totally. I want to ask you, as a creative person, how do you structure your day-to-day within quarantine? Do you have a routine? Do you get up at the same time? How do you maintain your creativity in this period?
It's a challenge because I'm also a parent. I have a toddler, and I'm now homeschooling a toddler. So that has been a real learning curve and a real adjustment to just carve out physical space where there's quiet space. So I'm finding my creative time is now shifting to late at night, like in the middle of the night or very early in the morning before the sun comes up. And that is a very different schedule and not one that I want to keep once we come out of this.
I hear you. Well, thanks for sharing that. I do want to ask you about your journey through from when you began filmmaking to now. We'll kind of go through some of the highlights. One of your remarkable films is Twitch. Maybe you can tell people, what is Twitch about, and what was the process like of putting this poignant story of a young girl torn between two worlds together?
Sure. So Twitch is a short film that I made while I was in film school at NYU in grad school. And it is semi-autobiographical based on experiences that I had growing up. My mother is disabled. She has multiple sclerosis and is in a wheelchair. And I have grown up taking care of her as the primary caretaker in the family from when I was 7 years old until I left for college. So I made a short film and cast her in the film. And then I cast another actress to play a kind of fictionalized version of myself when I was 15, 16 years old. And we went back to Oakland, where I grew up, to film in that house where I grew up. So it was really a personal, kind of cathartic story, as well as one that opened a lot of doors for me professionally. So that short film was a 10-minute short film nominated for a Student Academy Award. It premiered at Slam Dance, and a film in France. I'm trying to remember the name. Some fantastic film festival in France of short films. And it played about 100 different film festivals. So it really traveled the circuit. And through that journey is when I met a lot of the creative collaborators who ended up coming on board to make my first feature film, which is I Believe in Unicorns, which I made as my thesis film the next year after making Twitch. And another kind of interesting side note about Twitch is it was also the subject of a reality TV show on IFC called Film School, directed by Nanette Burstein, which was about film students at NYU making their student films. So we were, profiled on that show, which was not an experience I'd like to repeat, but definitely one that also opened up a different kind of doors for me in a different sense. And that film did find a home, through IFC.
Wonderful. Leah, I have to ask, what was the response to Twitch among your family? Because it is such a deeply personal story. Were they surprised, shocked, thankful? What was the vibe there?
Yeah. So really, the main family member who it's relevant to is my mom. She had not been in a film before. And I think it was surprising for her at first to see a perspective of her life from another point of view. And yet also, again, like I mentioned, really cathartic. For both the short film and my feature film, my mom came out to the theater for the theatrical premiere and brought a bunch of her friends and colleagues from her disability rights activist groups and so forth. And it really was an emotional experience and an emotional journey. It's so rare to see folks with disabilities on screen, like incredibly rare, especially when they're played by people with disabilities. I think, the disability community, although 20% of our population have disabilities, in Hollywood, it's like 1%. I mean, it's like the lowest of the low in terms of all of the different groups and all of the various diversity programs. People with disabilities are constantly overlooked. So I think, there was something beyond the personal element of the storytelling. There was something bigger than broader than that as well, that people were able to connect to, whether they themselves have disabilities or someone in their family or are caretaking for someone who's sick. There really was a kind of universal story element to that.
Yeah, well, I encourage everyone to check out this film if they can. Now, let's put Leah's social media up on there's your website at the bottom on the crawl. So make sure you go to the website and check out her portfolio and her social media. There it is up on the screen. So make sure to follow and like everything she's doing. I do want to ask about your subsequent project, which you mentioned, I Believe in Unicorns, also an imaginative and creative story. What led you to create this film, and what was the response? How did it connect with the audience?
So I Believe in Unicorns is a magical realist portrait of a teenage girl who runs away from home with an older guy and gets in over her head. It, investigates issues of sexual consent and dating violence and some kind of really heavy subject matter, but through a perspective of a fantasy world. And this 16-year-old girl, who's played by Natalia Dyer, imagining the world as she wishes it could be. So there's a lot of stop motion animation. There's a lot of fireworks and explosions and dragons and unicorns and a real kind of fantastical lens. And in creating this story, I wanted to create a character that I could have related to when I was 16. Again, growing up, in my own life experience, I would often escape to the cinema and go to the local art house theater or the local film festivals and watch films and come across worlds that I had never known. And I wanted to create a film that had that element of magic and surrealism and a real kind of subjective perspective of watching a story unfold from this girl's eyes. the response was really incredibly positive, and the experience of making the film was as magical of an adventure as what shows up on screen. So we made the film, we shot on Super 16 millimeter film, as well as Super 8 film. We did all of the effects, as many as possible, in camera. So again, like I mentioned, stop motion animation, we did like light effects and melting ice castles and all kinds of crazy, insane things. Anything we could think of, we tried it. So it was a real fun journey and a fun adventure. And I was lucky enough to work with a producer, Heather Ray, who I met through Sundance, who's the Native American programmer there and had just produced Frozen River and a bunch of fantastic films. And then my cast was incredible. So Natalia Dyer, when I met her, this was her first feature film. She was 16 at the time, in high school in Nashville, Tennessee. And I met her through a casting director friend, and we Skyped and we FaceTimed, and she flew out and auditioned, and she was just incredible. And she's since gone on to just blow up. So she's now plays Nancy Wheeler, the older sister on Stranger Things, and has kind of launched her career. And then her friend is played by Julia Garner, who also was a new actress at the time. This was also her first feature film, and played Natalia's best friend in the film. And she now, just got an Emmy for Ozark. And then the male lead is played by Peter Vack, who I met. We have the same agent, and he had some more experience and had done more films before. But this was a real, unique creative process for him to be in this type of independent story. So really blessed to have a fantastic cast and a fantastic crew. The film premiered at South by Southwest in competition, and went on. It went right from South by to Atlanta, where, as you mentioned, it won the Grand Jury Prize. And then it played a few dozen other film festivals. And I was able to retrace the footsteps of that short film Twitch with the feature, with Unicorns. Went to a lot of the same festivals, as well as new ones as well. And then it was released in theaters in 2015, and then came out on Netflix and Amazon and iTunes and all the rest. And during that time, Natalia then was in Stranger Things, which became Netflix, one of Netflix's hugest sensations, which really was a boost for our film in making its money back through the sale to Netflix as well.
Fascinating. Ruth, actually in Savannah, is asking a question. She wants to know, Leah, how do you know when you found an actor, as a director, how do you know when that's the person?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I feel like casting is 90% of the job of directing. I love casting. I love the casting process. And I think, when you found the right actor, you just know it in your gut, like you just feel it. And in this case, I knew I wanted to cast a 16-year-old girl to play a 16-year-old girl. And that is not often done. In Hollywood, you often have what I call the 90210 effect, where you get like a 25-year-old pretending to be a teenager. And often that's done for legal reasons. People under 18, there's a lot of restrictions and limited work hours and all sorts of things. But I think it's worth it. I'm a strong believer in authentic casting. In the same way that, it was important for me to cast a person with disabilities to play a character with disabilities, it's important for me to cast a teenager to play a teenager. And I also knew that for a small indie feature, we didn't have the budget to do a giant open call the way that big studio films do. So we were really creative. And I reached out to every casting director I know and researched what were the other films that had just come out that had cast actresses of that same demographic, that same age range. And through a casting director who had cast a Coen Brothers film, True Grit, I reached out to them and said, hey, who did you see for that role that Haley Steinfeld got? Who were the top three who didn't make it into the film, but were that age range? And Natalia was on that list, and I researched her and found her, and then rewrote the part for her. Same thing with Julia Garner. I saw her in a short film at a film festival I was a programmer for, and said, oh, she's really special. She's amazing. And she came in to audition. When she came in, I realized she wasn't right for the lead. And she even said it. She was like, Leah, I love this script so much, but I don't think I'm ready to play this role. It's a very mature role. There were sex scenes in it. It's a heavy independent film lead role. She said, I don't think I'm quite ready for that, but I'd love to be in this film. So I wrote a part for her to play the best friend. So I think, when an actor's right, when you feel it in your gut, and when they have something special about them that you just can't look away, like you have to keep watching them. And really great actors have that. It's this kind of ephemeral quality of that kind of star power. And I think it's important to cast who's right for the role and then reshape the project around them as best you can, rather than trying to fit someone in a box and check it off. I think it's a creative collaboration.
Yeah, it's a great and very thoughtful answer. I do want to ask, I'm a musician and music producer. Talk to me a little bit about the music in this film and how you went about choosing the soundtrack for it.
Sure. So, really strong soundtrack for the film. First, I worked with a composer, Sasha Gordon, who is a friend of mine from film school. She's a director and a composer. She composed entirely an original score, a really magical score. And we looked at a lot of references like City of Lost Children and Terrence Malick's films, Tree of Life, etc. And she created just this beautiful emotional thread, very subtle, that weaves throughout the entire film, including the end credits music, which we had Natalia come in and hum. So like original vocalists as well. So Sasha's an incredible talent. So a shout out to her. And then for the soundtrack and the other music in the film, I worked with the music supervisor, Colby Train, who had worked with Tracy McKnight, who's really prolific in this space. And he did so much with our limited budget to find all kinds of fantastic music that we could actually afford. And I think that's a mistake you often see in the indie film world is people have their heart set on one piece of music, and then it turns out it costs, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. In our case, I really trusted Colby. I said, this is the emotional feel that we're looking for in this scene. And then I trusted him and what he found that he could bring to it.
Gotcha. I'm excited to hear the music now. It's tantalizing now as you've gone into it. I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your work with Film Fatales. Tell me why you founded this organization and how it's blossomed over the years.
Sure. So I started Film Fatales at the same time that I was in development for I Believe in Unicorns. And these things really are parallel journeys in my life and happen very organically. So in the same way that I became a filmmaker because I wanted to tell stories about women on screen that I had rarely seen, I started Film Fatales to help enable other filmmakers to tell stories about characters we rarely get to see. So at the time, I was still at NYU. I hadn't really been aware of gender and racial discrimination in the film industry. I'd been in a bit of a bubble, to be honest, in film school. Our class at NYU was pretty diverse, 50% men, women, a lot of people of color, a lot of queer folks. It wasn't until I got out of that bubble and was out in the real world on the film festival circuit with that short film Twitch that I started to really feel, wow, this is a white boys club. This is a wealthy, cisgendered, straight, white male club. Everywhere I went, people misidentified me. They assumed I was an actress or a director's girlfriend, never assumed I was the director. I was always the only woman on panels of directors, often the only queer person, all the way through when I made my feature. I Believe in Unicorns. There was the only film directed by a woman and a queer person in competition at South by Southwest, and very white festival. So it became just painfully apparent all of the biases in the industry, which now I think are really, people see and there's a lot of press around, but 10 years ago wasn't talked about as much. So I did what a lot of filmmakers do. I was reaching out to other filmmakers for advice. Hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? That kind of thing. And some of the folks who were the most generous with their time and knowledge were other women directors. Allison Anders ended up reading my script and coming on board an executive producer. Kimberly Pierce, who I'd admired when I was, 12, 13 years old with Boys Don't Cry, gave me incredible advice when I was making my first feature. And I said, you know what, this can be more efficient if I just have dinner and invite a bunch of folks over. So I made dinner and I hosted a dinner party in my living room in Brooklyn and invited 6 other women feature filmmakers, all of whom had more experience than myself. And we sat around a table for an hour and I just asked them questions about filmmaking. And at the end of that hour, it was so inspiring and empowering, not just for myself, but for those other 6 filmmakers as well, that we decided to do it again the next month. And another woman, Paula Mendoza, was like, I'll host the next month. And she's gone on now to be a founder of the Women's March. And Rai Russo Young just did her first, her 3rd studio film. So it was a really incredible group, those 6 filmmakers. And every month we just started hosting dinner parties, and it organically grew and grew and grew incredibly quickly. So in that roasting dinner, that rotating dinner party format, 6 months later, we had a waiting list 500 people long. Someone from that group in New York moved to LA and started the same format out here in LA. Another person moved to Canada, and someone moved to Chicago and New Orleans. And we have now dozens of local groups, local communities of women and non-binary feature film and television directors of all backgrounds who get together monthly to create a really supportive environment to share resources, to share their knowledge, to lift each other up in this industry. While Film Fatales was growing as a community, I finished that feature film. I Believe in Unicorns premiered, and it traveled that festival circuit. And while I was traveling the world in film festivals, we kind of spread the gospel of Film Fatales and started sister groups in half a dozen countries around the world. So there's a group in Cape Town and in Istanbul and in Australia and in Toronto and in Montreal. So really tapped into a need that filmmakers have, particularly women filmmakers, particularly women of color and LGBTQ plus women filmmakers, a need for community and support and to not be the only person in the room anymore. And I think, that's the real danger of tokenism, is when you are the only person who looks like yourself in the room, it's very hard to make space to reach back and help someone else into that room with you. But when you get to a quorum, when there's a handful of women and people of color and queer folks in the room, then you see systemic change happen and real shift. And it's exciting to me that over these past, 5-6 years, as Film Fatales has grown as a community, and now we're a formal nonprofit organization with programming initiatives and weekly webinars and all sorts of resources. While we've grown as an organization, the industry has shifted and changed as well, with Time's Up, with Me Too, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with all of these activist pushes coming from all angles. You are seeing now more opportunities for marginalized voices and underrepresented filmmakers. And so we are now finding ourselves, Film Fatales is finding ourselves in this really unique position of acting almost like a management company for all of this talent that has been overlooked systemically for years and years and years. Finally, we're seeing people reach out to us, on a daily basis saying, I'm looking to hire a Black woman director with sci-fi experience. Who can you recommend? Or I'm looking to crew up and I want to have an inclusive crew. Who can you suggest? So we've really pivoted from that support network, which still is existing and is our backbone, but we're pivoting into a really exciting new role in one of programming. So we have an initiative called the Parity Pipeline, which is hundreds of feature film and short film projects directed by marginalized voices. And we work with hundreds of film festivals and other industry organizations looking to hire closer to parity, looking to fund, give grants to filmmakers from marginalized backgrounds, and looking to program their film festival lineups more equitably. And it's really exciting to be in this vortex, in this space right now, where we're seeing people actually put their money where their mouth is and see actual change happen. South by Southwest is such a great example. So back in 2014, when I was the only woman director with a filming competition there, the following year, we reached out to those programmers and said, what's going on here? Why aren't you programming more inclusively? We know you want to. And Janet and Jared said, we absolutely do, but these films aren't on our radar. They're not submitting to us. They're not in our alumni pool. And, we just don't have the resources to find these filmmakers. And I heard that again and again from all these festival programmers. So through our initiative, we're now reaching out to these festivals and we send them lists. Here's 100 films, all directed by queer women of color that are eligible to premiere at your film festival. And the festival programmer will invite those films in, offer them discounts, offer them waivers, and then program those films. South by Southwest last year, 80% of the competition lineup was directed by women, and about half of that were women of color. And there's still a long way to go when it comes to filmmakers with disabilities and LGBTQ folks. And I'm not saying we've reached parity by any means, but I am guardedly optimistic that the industry is starting to shift, especially in the independent space, and hopefully we'll start to see Hollywood get on board as well.
Wow, you are inspirational and remarkable. You're not just seeing the change, you're being the change, and you're really a pioneer for this industry. And I hope that, I just hope more people find out about your organization. I think they will. How can people get involved with Film Fatales?
Sure. So I can try and chat it, but it's filmfatales.org is our website, and filmfatales.org on social. Okay. Those who have directed feature-length films are welcome to join as members. Those who have not are welcome to join as advocates and allies. We also have weekly webinars. So there's another website, which is watchfilmfatales.org. Maybe there's a way to make it like show up and sparkle emoji under my name. Yeah. Watchfilmfatales.org has information about all of our weekly webinars that we've been doing that have been really incredible throughout the quarantine, and hopefully will continue beyond this pandemic. It's been a real great educational resource, and they are free and open to the public.
Got it. Thank you so much for being on the broadcast today. You're a dynamo. And so
likewise, it's great to meet you.
Yeah, I wish you all the best with what you're working on, and I'm excited to see whatever you're working on next. So thanks everyone for watching this edition of the Quarantine Film Series. Happy Labor Day, everyone. I want to thank my friend Shane for producing the show, obviously. And if you're in his neck of the woods, try his Spanish tortilla. He's a really good chef. So thanks everyone. Have a good night.